This episode is brought to you by Progressive. Most of you aren't just listening right now. You're driving, cleaning, and even exercising. But what if you could be saving money by switching to Progressive? Drivers who save by switching save nearly $750 on average. And auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Multitask right now. Quote today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $744 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations.
Hi there, everyone. Welcome back to Real Estate Real and Unscripted with Nicole. Thank you guys for joining me. I'm so excited for my guests on today's show. Today's show is going to be about the appraisal process. And with me today, I have two of my favorite appraisers for years and years, Dan Lindeman and Moody. And I am going to be going through some questions with them to help you guys out there learn a little bit more about what the process of an appraisal looks like and what you need to keep in mind as a homeowner or a buyer, and ultimately dispelling some myths around what's out there and, misinformation that might be out there, and just giving you a better idea and understanding of what it means to have to get your home appraised, and ultimately, answer any questions you may have. So let's get started. So I am going to start with Moody. The appraisal process. What does that look like? What does it mean to have an appraisal done on a home from start to finish? So oftentimes, and I'll kind of start with saying, a lot of times my sellers will say, "Oh, the buyer hired the appraiser, so of course they're going to give them the value that they want." So from the beginning, right? So what happens? Yeah. Buyers buying with a loan. Speak to a little bit about, the flow and regulations and things that are involved in that.
Yeah. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having us, Nicole. It's just I'm so excited to be here. We've known each other for so long, and I know you've been talking about doing this podcast, and I'm really proud of the trajectory that your career has taken you and how many people you've been able to help. I'm glad that I'm kind of a part of the team when I can be, right? So thank you for that. To jump right into it, Nicole, an appraisal is basically getting an expert, that's what Dan and I are, in this context, to basically determine what the fair market value of, real estate, an asset is, in the context of, either a sale or a refinance, or, sometimes in other cases, I do a lot of private work, which has to do with divorce or estate. And it's to determine what the fair market value is. And, to basically give you, like what that entails from start to finish is we'll receive an order from a bank or a private individual, a lender, and we will then do research on the property. We'll set up an appointment to go see the property. Oftentimes, not always, but most of the times. We'll go out, we'll measure the property, we'll take interior and exterior pictures, we'll plot the floor plan, and then we'll do the hard work, which is basically reconcile all of the comparables and kind of boil down, like, what are the best comps, what are the contributory adjustments to determine differences in characteristics and how they help or hurt the value. And ultimately we produce a report. That report is then sent to the client. In some cases it gets reviewed and audited. And then once it gets accepted, it informs basically the other side of the equation, if they're going to lend on it, how much they're going to lend on it, or if it's a dissolution of assets due to divorce, what the equitable distribution is going to be. And, we have to basically produce credible results that stand, scrutiny from various parts. So that's the broad strokes.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm actually making a note because you got me thinking of a question that came up.
Well, ask it. What's the question? Yeah, ask it. What do you got?
Yeah. So what can cause an issue, Dan, in the appraisal process? So you're a seller, appraisers come into your house. Obviously there's different loans, right? So conventional, FHA, VA. Touch on different issues that can come up based on different loans and guidelines that you guys have to identify when you're at that property. Like Moody said, if the lender will loan on it, like if they'll loan on it, right? And or how much they will loan on it. But what are some of the common things that kind of derail the appraisal that makes things, like we say, subject to? You can kind of explain that too, but yeah, go through that.
So at the end of the day, for a financial transaction where you're getting a loan from a bank, the appraiser is the only one going to that property and kind of verifying everything for the lender about that property. So the property needs to have minimum standards depending on what type of loan product you have. Like the one that's most strict is a FHA loan, where you can't have any hazards there. You can't have any faucets that are leaking underneath, dripping down water. You can't have any exposed outlets. You can't have any peeling and chipping paint if the home was built before 1978. You can't have like missing shingles or missing broken tiles. All that stuff needs to be repaired in order for you to get that loan. So a lot of sellers don't know that. And a lot of agents don't know that either. Mm-hmm. Like for FHA appraisals, there's a different set of standards than conventional loan. Conventional loan may be a little bit more lax, but still the property still needs to pass. So like if you have water stains all over the inside of the ceiling, that lender is going to require a roof inspection to see if that roof's okay, or they're going to require it to be repaired if it's not okay. If there's any like safety hazards, structural hazards,
substantial cracks,
hazards,
substantial cracks along the outside of a house.
Yeah, like Nicole, I did one for Nicole. I just happened to be on the other side of it.
He happened to be on the buyer side of one of my listings, and I pointed it out that it was going to be a problem, and the inspector didn't even point it out. The house needed piles.
Yeah, so I'm walking around around this property, and there's huge gaps. I can stick my finger in the gaps, and then I go inside in one of the bedrooms. The tile floor is cracked. It looks like it's not level at all. Like one side of the ceiling's higher than the other. And it's like I was the only one to point this out. I'm like, hey, this requires another inspection to see what's going on here. And that inspection spurred a repair that was needed in order to get the loan on the house. In this case, maybe it's instead of $20,000 or something, right?
$14,000. Yeah. And I had seen it and I was like, ooh, this is not good. And I even said, we're going to have an issue with this. It's going to come up. And then the inspection happened and I'm like, no one came back to me. I don't know
how an inspector
and then you called me and I'm like, yeah,
agent.
I don't know. Honestly, and it wasn't like anyone was hiding anything because at the end of the day, we're relying on the professionals to levy their opinions. Right. And if there's an issue, there's an issue. And that was funny. That was one that Dan kind of popped up on the other side and he's like, hey, I got it back with the report. And I'm like, oh, I know that guy. Yeah, okay. And we had to follow up. We did the right thing, did an inspection. Engineer could not certify it. And because they could not certify it, we had to get a foundation company to come out. And luckily we managed those permits well. But, like I said, it was something I usually like to get ahead of things in the beginning, but to tell a seller, hey, you're going to need to spend 13, 15 grand to fix something before they're like, let's see if it's really a problem. Right. So I always just kind of give that so that they know, and they weren't surprised and we just went with it and that was it. But yeah, things like that.
Because at the end of the day, all the lender is concerned with, if I have to foreclose on this property and take it back, what am I going to lose? That's basically it. And you don't want to give the lender any more risk than is out there. The next big thing is, of course, the price. If it doesn't appraise for your contract price, if it comes in below, that may be an issue. Those are the two things the sellers need to worry about is condition of the property, and then what happens if it doesn't appraise.
Are you seeing, either of you, are you seeing in the world of real estate, not your private stuff with the divorce stuff, but are you seeing where a lot of times more recently there's a larger delta between what the seller thinks, the contract price, and what it's appraising at, just from how the market has shifted? Obviously, the thing is, and it's kind of beneficial for a seller because the appraisals are backwards, right? 6 months or whatever, a year, depending on how much data you have, which backwards is better than now. And so, sometimes you don't, but I think right now, unfortunately, the prices have gone down and sellers are kind of getting a little bit of a reality check. So what are you seeing, either of you, both of you can chime in after, from like market trends recently over the last year, like most struggles and difficulties or things that are noteworthy?
You can go, Moody. What do you got?
Thank you. So Nicole, what I'm seeing on my end, and I think that most of my peers will, kind of echo the sentiment, is that the market has softened for us. And even though it has softened, every seller thinks their property is worth $1 million. That's kind of the default. I think condos have been hit the hardest. I did one recently, and the contract was for 175. It came in at 160, and everybody was scrambling. The truth is that we look at the recent comps. So a lot of times sellers, I think, tend to look at listings. And, they're seeing all these flyers come from realtors that are saying, oh, this is listed for this much and this listing, but they're not looking at like, what did it boil down to, right? And that's why it's important that we don't just look at cash sales, but also like properties that have been conveyed via conventional or FHA or VA that went through some scrutiny. So that poses the condo market is posing an issue. We have seen an uptick in inventory where, people are trying to get out because of, special assessments that are coming up, or, insurance premium increases. There's kind of been a knee-jerk reaction after the tragedy in Sunny Isles Beach. So I think that kind of had a big effect on the condo market. So we're seeing the increases in inventory and definitely softening there. But there are some pockets, even in single family homes. Mostly, I feel like things are stable. I don't know if Dan what he's seeing, but it's been for the most part stable. We haven't seen major increases or declines. I would say if we're talking about Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County, that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, in general, every neighborhood's different. Like the lower price things, like stuff under 500 grand, is still moving really, really well because it's the most affordable product, and it's still increasing in price. I worked on one today in Kensington and Coral Springs, and the market is getting killed in there. Actually, I'm sorry, this was in Wyndham Lakes. I'm looking at my stats now, like -7 to 12% for similar sized properties to this home I was doing. And then the general market was -19 to 23% over the past year. So basically that's going down 1 to 2% a month for that general market, just for that section. Now, when you look at the generalities, like the whole county or something like that, those numbers are mixed. Everything's mixed into there. All the homes are mixed in there. But once you get into a specific neighborhood, this one was going down. So something that happened a year ago, went under contract a year ago, it could be -12% from that price.
So let me also say, and I agree with everything that you're saying, Dan. That's why it's kind of important, and lenders kind of press us to use the most recent comps because they're the most reflective of what's going on in the market. In the absence of comps that are recently sold, we have to kind of go back in time, or we may go out, farther in distance. Now, if we're using older comps, it then behooves us as appraisers to determine what is the market dynamic, what has been going on. Is it a stable market to where there is no requirement for a time adjustment, or is it declining? And then, like Dan was saying, he was able to prove, about a 1% per month. So now we have to apply those negative time adjustments to older comps. The idea being, if something sold for X amount a year ago, if it came to market now, it would sell for so much less. So we have to reconcile that negative time through a negative time adjustment, that decline. And so even in the one that I was mentioning, I had to apply negative time adjustments for older comps, and that's what brought the value lower. But what's interesting is that was that concept was also supported by the listings, right?
Yeah.
There were listings that matched my value. So that's the check, right? When you have listings that
are active, that look like that one, that aren't moving,
correct,
and they're at that price. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Right. Because remember, listings, it's kind of a wish list. You can list anything for any price that you want. And what we see is when the numbers start getting, into reality, that you're going to see a market reaction and people actually say, okay, let's go ahead and put in our offer. But if it's way out of whack, it'll just stay on the market, and you'll see that reflected in the days on market.
So that one I was talking about at Wyndham Lakes, I was doing, it's already been listed. It's been on the market 3 months and it's not selling. And they're trying to figure out this. Apparently they didn't trust their agent, and the agent said, oh, we need a price reduction. And they just wanted to double check to see if that agent was, being honest with them. And I'm doing the appraisal. I'm like, good Lord, they need like a 15% price adjustment at like the $1 million price point just to get where the market is now. And they're just really, really over by like 15%. So that property is going to sit there and not sell if they don't reduce the price.
There's a lot of inventory, but not everyone is actually for sale. Like, they're not actually playing. And that's what I will tell a seller. That's one thing that I was very, very detailed on when I started in this. And I've learned so much from the both of you guys over the years. Like, I ask 1,000,001 questions, and I value that partnership tremendously. But that's allowed me to, I even took appraisal classes at Gold Coast, and I didn't get my license. I just did it for fun. Right. But I feel like as agents, we need to do better and have a better grasp of how pricing works, and be able to understand and really dig into how you guys are going to end up, coming to the table with your appraisal, right? So a lot of times you'll see, agents and a lot of people use the effective Zillow estimate type of, Zestimates or this cloud CMA, and they're all estimates. But I feel like in our industry, my peers don't do a good job at knowing how to actually understand how that value translates and how to look at, this is the house. It's 2,100 square feet. The one across the street was 3,200 square feet. It sold for X. It had full renovation. It had impact windows. It had a pool. This one doesn't. Like, how does that translate in your world? So I think that that's something that, I don't know. I think a big part of the difference in those numbers is just setting the wrong expectations with a seller, or not having the guts to say, listen, I'm not going to take this if it's overpriced. And if you want to play in your ballpark, call one of my appraisers, have them do an appraisal. And if you want to play in your ballpark to see if I'm wrong, great. But there's going to be something built in that listing agreement, because I'm not God and I'm not a magician, and the market's the market and numbers are numbers. You can't, and you see very distinctly when you have a property that's overpriced, when you price it to that bracket that it needs to be in. So I'll tell sellers, listen, you're going to sell north-south of 600. If you're going to list it at 700, ain't nobody going to look at it. No one's going to see it. And then you can drop it to 650. But if it's supposed to sell at, right at 600, they're still not going to trigger, right? There's a certain point where you hit a bracket where the market triggers, and it's going to end up, it moves, and it's like black and white. I mean, I've done this for so many years that it's like science. And I tell sellers, it is science. You will see it. And then it's because that's because you priced it so low. No, there's numbers behind that. So I think that as realtors and the training that we get, I think needs to be a little bit more detailed. And I know you both have done trainings and stuff. That's how I met you both. And I appreciate that. But I think there's definitely there's a gap there, because we are
I
agents.
agree.
We're supposed
I agree.
to. I'm sure you've had situations where you've dealt with agents where they're like, what do you mean the price and da-da-da, and, and they're trying to contest things. And you're like, I don't understand. And me being me, I'm like, I don't understand how you don't understand. Like, they're like, well, this property, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, there's no value. Like, what are you even talking about? That doesn't make any sense, right? So I'm sure you've had your fair share of that. I'm just getting off my soapbox because I'm very passionate about the pricing side of things. And my numbers are usually, I could tell you I made a mistake once that I was shocked that she got what she got. Other than that, I've been on point because I know
because that was just a one-time buyer for that.
That was a
property.
one-time, exactly. That's the thing. It was not
just that.
exactly.
Yep.
That was that one situation. But in the hundreds of things that we've done, it also is very helpful that they are priced properly from the start, especially in a declining market, because as time goes by, and I love people that tell me I have all the time in the world. If I could tell you how much that has happened to me and how badly it ended for these poor people, it's really, I'm sure you've seen that, but I have all the time in the world. And that's the big misconception, sellers out there. Like, you don't have all the time in the world. Time is not your friend when you are sitting on the market. And we get that all the time, that, I'm not in a rush. Especially if you're in a declining condo market and I told you to sell 3 years ago and you told me that I didn't know what I was talking about because there were 5 listings that were listed 20% more than I was recommending. Mind you, 3 years later, none of them sold and they sold for significantly less. If I'm telling you that and you're here 3 years later taking about 40% less for the property than what I told you could get 3 years ago because the whole market's tanked, it kills me because I want to help my sellers and I want to do the right thing by them. But unfortunately, people are, their own worst enemies. So if there's one thing I could tell people, time is not your friend. The time is going to hurt you. The longer it sits, the worse it's going to look to the buyer, and the pricing, will go down. So talk to me about how much are you doing pre-listing appraisals these days? Have you been called upon? Is that becoming a little bit more common in the last couple of years?
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. What if comparing car insurance rates was as easy as putting on your favorite podcast? With Progressive, it is. Just visit the Progressive website to quote with all the coverages you want. You'll see Progressive's direct rate, then their tool will provide options from other companies so you can compare. All you need to do is choose the rate and coverage you like. Quote today at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
So pre-listing stuff is 20% of my business. Agents hiring me, they're offering as an upsell to their clients when they're meeting with them and saying, hey, this is what sets me apart. I'm going to get an appraisal, figure out what it's worth, and then I'll let you know what I think it's worth, and then we can figure it out together. So it's like an added bonus to hire that agent. And it's a huge benefit. When it's priced properly, it sells quicker and for a higher price. It makes everybody look good.
Yeah.
So the benefits are there. And the benefits for even doing listing appraisals on stuff that's been on the market, it's going to spur a price reduction because that's the reason why it's not selling most of the time, is because it's not priced correctly. So I do a lot of that pre-listing stuff, and it is, as long as it's priced correctly and the appraisals correctly within a few percent, the market's going to dictate where it falls. Right. So it's a huge benefit for the agent and the sellers to get a pre-listing appraisal.
Yeah, I agree. I do quite a bit of, I don't know by percentage, but whenever I get these talks, it's really realtors that have problems pricing things. And I always appreciate, when we talk to even seasoned realtors and they're not really, they have a problem pricing something, and they'll go ahead and say, Moody, I can't make heads or tails of this, help me out. I'm going to go ahead and hire you. Or, if it's a savvy seller, they'll say, okay, the seller is going to hire you. We just want to get this price correctly because we don't want to overshoot it where we don't get a market reaction, and we don't want to leave money on the table. So it's kind of finding that sweet spot. And, to your point earlier, Nicole, like I feel you kind of hit the nail on the head, and you're going in like doing the right thing. Even sometimes it might be to your detriment. I think a lot of realtors are just hungry to get listings, and they will yes the heck out of the meeting with the sellers, and just to get the listing. So they'll pump their head full of numbers, and then what'll happen invariably will be that they have to reduce and reduce, and then buyers, as we discussed, they smell the blood in the water. They see it as a strategy. They say, "Oh, these people, we'll just wait them out and then hit them low," and it does end up hurting them. And going back to the Zillow, I always say that, listen, if Zillow was correct to the tune that like lenders and all the parties involved in a transaction relied upon it, and they said it's very accurate, Dan and I would not have work. We would be obsolete, and we would be doing something else. I don't know. I think you agree with that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
no, I mean, it's a Zestimate. It's literally, they don't go inside the house. They're not, you can't replace what you guys can do and what humans can do to define that, the price. I was going to say, and I lost my train of thought.
So, about sellers is like when these agents take on, just basically just to get the listing and come in high and promise the world, it doesn't help that agent. They don't look good when that property is just sitting on the market for month after month after month. That doesn't make you look good. Nobody in that neighborhood is going to hire you if you can't sell the freaking house or the condo.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. So I have lost a lot of listings. I mean, I closed like 54 this year past, and I probably lost about 20 that I didn't end up taking for reasons as this. And typically what I do after is I put the listing in the MLS, the address, and I create a search. I'm my own client in the MLS, and I create a search with the address. And when anything happens to that property, I get alerted and I see. So it's been helpful, and I can see, and it helps me with my skills. And I'm like, shit, I did a good job there. Yep, there you go. Look at that. Year later, still hasn't sold, or like 6 months later, dropped to less than, or sold less than I told them they could sell. Whatever. And it's not about being right. It's not. I'm definitely a vindictive type because I like to try to help people, but it's upsetting because I want to help, and I want to make sure they're in a good position. And yes, the agents that are willing to tell you what you want to hear, that's a problem. You should not want to have people qualify you without pushing back. Pushing back is what changes, right? Pushing back is what grows us. You don't want someone that's a yes person. And as an agent in this market, and as a seller's listening to this, if your agent is willing to walk away from your listing, think about how stupid that sounds. Like, the agent is willing to walk away from your listing. Why? They're obviously telling you something, right? So why would someone walk away from business? Like, heed that advice. Like, that's an omen, right? So, definitely interesting with that respect. So
you keep track of your stats. That's really cool. I didn't know you could do that in the MLS, is put an address in there and get updates on it.
Yeah, I create a search for myself. Idea. I literally create, and for agents out there, I want to train agents and help them, get better. Any listings that I lose and I refuse to take, I will literally create the search, and I have I am my own contact. I have my other email in there, and I'm Nicole, my maiden name. And I have dozens of searches that are the name or the address of the property. And then literally it sends me the alert of anything that happens, expires, cancels, everything. I leave everything blank on the left side, and I just put the address in and the city, and it's good because that helps us hone our skills, right? Like I said, there was one that we were just like, what in tarnation? Other than that, I have never been wrong. Never. And I'm not saying that arrogantly. It's because I put a lot of time into the skills that I've honed for that. So yeah, check that out. It's pretty cool.
That's really good. And pulling up if a listing expired and you already had an appointment with them several months earlier, that's an excellent marketing strategy.
Yes, exactly. I
Good
do that
job,
as well.
Nicole.
Yep, 100%.
Good job.
Yep. Thank you. All right. So what do you recommend for agents when it comes to, the appraisal? Like, how should an agent help prepare for the appraisal? Is there anything that they should do, know, provide, inform. I know with condos, we want to try to get you the information. You have any questions, comps, like what do each of you guys suggest for agents before that appointment?
Yeah, I'll go first on this one. I'm in the boat where I like it when the agents are present. A lot of times we kind of default to the lockbox, either Supra or a combo lockbox, and just kind of go whenever we want to, within a window. I don't mind the realtor being there. At the end of the day, you guys are still like the experts for that field. Maybe some information that we don't know. So I like to meet the realtors there. For me, from a personal side, as a business owner, it also helps me to put a face to the name and introduce myself, and offer my services, as an aside. But as far as what I tell them, like, hey, if you want to bring me certain things, like I definitely appreciate bringing the survey if it's a single family house. If they have a cheat sheet that has all of the updates and renovations and the years that those updates and renovations were done, I tell them bring that. I tell them, listen, leave the prices off. I'll determine what the contributory value is based on my research and analysis. If they want to bring comps, I tell them, listen, and Dan can give his opinion. I'm in the camp that, I don't mind the realtor bringing comps. I tell them, listen, whatever comps that you determined, that were valid to bring up, bring the price to the price point that you got. I will definitely look at them. I don't promise that I'm going to use them, but I will certainly consider them. And that's my position, and every appraiser is different. I know certainly plenty of appraisers that, they just don't want anything. What I do want, realtors to know is that we have to limit the interaction to basically that and not really discuss value. At the end of the day, we're beholden to the appraisal management companies and lenders. We have written agreements with them that says hey, do not have value conversations. If you do, we need to be notified, because there should be no undue influence from any parties, to basically achieve a certain value. So we have to limit it at that. And, it's happened before, where people kind of nudge you and say, hey, I needed to come in at this.
Oh, God,
the worst situation I had was a guy he was telling me, listen, it has to hit this number. This is what I need. And I was like, listen, we can't have this conversation. Please refrain from it. And then I got a follow-up email and telling me the same thing. And I was like, listen, that's it. I have to now decline the report, this appraisal, send it to the appraisal management company. They still paid me for it, and they reassigned it. So and then I told him, listen, you're not to be anywhere near the next appraiser. So, it's rare that happens. I think, everybody kind of knows how to comport themselves. Yeah. But that's what I appreciate, when I do an appraisal.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. So I always, when I'm training these agents, I always say, meet the appraiser, no matter what side of the transaction you're on. Bring the list of improvements and the approximate dates they were put in. Bring 3 to 5 closed sales or pending sales that are recent, similar, and proximate. Do not go into that neighborhood and print out the 5 highest price sales and give them to the appraiser. Don't do that. Find out what's similar and print out those similar properties. And then a copy of the contract and all addendums, and then surveys and any other relevant information. But a lot of times, it's important that I'm not perfect. I may miss something sometimes. So yeah. I'm happy if they bring, 3 to 5 sales, and I'll go through them first. If I could deem them comparable, I'll use them. If they're not comparable, I may make a comment in the appraisal and say, hey, the agent supplied 5 sales. These were the addresses. I chose not to use 3 of these sales because they were not similar, because they were in a different neighborhood, or they were 50% larger, or whatever the case may be. But I it's good double check, because the agents in there, if the agent's farming that neighborhood, they know almost all the sales in there. They've been in all the listings, in all the closed sales. They know that neighborhood better than the appraiser. We're just generalists, and we only go into that neighborhood once or twice a month, or whatever the case may be. So an agent's a good resource if they're a good agent.
And it's like you said, if it's deemed appropriate, you use it. I like to ensure I attend all my appraisals unless literally I physically can't. But I like going because then I meet the appraisers and they're full of information. Like, we don't talk about the property. A lot of times you guys want to share info. I'll be like, hey, I had a question about something else. Like, it's good. And that's how I've learned everything over the years. I've literally gone through and asked questions and gotten information to grow myself. So, I always like to go. I'll bring the comps. We don't have any conversation. I know exactly what I'm supposed to do and what I'm not supposed to do. But, one thing that's beneficial for an agent to bring the comps, I'll never forget this. In the beginning of my career in 2016, I had a listing and this one agent called me and she was under contract and she was like, did you guys have your appraisal yet? And I was like, yeah, it's all good. And she's like, what do you mean all good? Like, you're listed at X and I barely could get Y. And I'm like, did you go to your appraisal? Did you bring the comps? Did you tell the appraiser that one comp that sold that was not like absurdly low, but was very low and kind of made it look bad, was that there were like 4 siblings that inherited the property and they hated each other. And those are things you as an appraiser can also call and ask and be like, hey, I'm looking at the comps, Mr. Listing Agent. I get calls by appraisers all the time. Like, hey, I'm looking at the comps. I was just curious. I just want to make sure there was no credit given. They'll ask just to make sure, or maybe the pictures weren't as clear, or maybe sometimes the pictures were taken down. So there might be a listing where the pictures were taken down. And when I priced that property, I called that agent and I said, hey, you don't have any pictures. I need to know what you sold. Like, was it renovated? What did it look like? And so I'll share that comment and be like, hey, reach out to the agent. The house was fully renovated. Mine isn't, right? Or whatever it might be, because they don't have the information out there. Like, as somebody who knows that community, you may know that there was a sale that didn't go through because of something or whatever it might have been. Or maybe there was mold. Maybe the house had been dropped because I had a situation where the house literally had water damage and mold, and you can't see that on the listing, but it sold for like 10% less than all the other ones, right? And that was the one of 3 comps that was used in her sale. It was mold and it was for people who inherited it. So, she was like, oh, they did use that one. I'm like, there were like 5 comps. Why would they use that one? And from then on, she's like, I didn't even think about that. It's not to guide you guys. It's to provide, any insight that you may not know, because at the end of the day, you're going to do what's right. Like, you're bounded by those laws and what you're required to do. But, it's funny if people are going to tell you it needs to come in at a certain price. That's wild. So let's see.
Yeah. And by the way, if supply all this information to the appraiser. Every appraiser is different. Some appraisers may seem as influenced if you give them a packet of information, but you should do it for every assignment, but not every appraiser is going to take the information. I know I do every time. And it's just information. So just provide it. And if they say they don't want it, then I would just accept that, because
you accept it, move on.
Some people are sticklers, and it takes a lot to influence me, and providing me 3 to 5 closed sales is not
going to do right. Yeah.
At all.
I had one appraiser ever in my whole career that said, I know how to do my job. Thank you very much. You could take these. I was like, no problem. I'm not saying you didn't. I said, I'm just showing you. And that was when it was priced right. And I said, I'm just showing you, what we used. And sometimes the comps are not even there, right? Sometimes the comps don't even exist that makes sense for that price. And then there's nothing, it's like, all right, let's see what happens. I was going to say, oh my goodness, lost my train of thought.
If the agent doesn't meet, let's just say I'm doing a sale transaction, the agent doesn't meet me and doesn't provide any information. If that sale is coming in way short, if an agent I always call up if I appear to be missing something, if it's way off on the price, be like, what sales did you use to price this property? That's the only sentence I'll ask them. Do you want to provide the sales you used to price this property? That you use to price this property. If I know I'm coming up short, because to see if I'm missing something.
Which technically
kind of do the same thing on the front end. Yeah. Like if if I get an appraisal request and, they provide the sales contract and I have, pretty reliable information and I pull the comps and it's like way off, I'm like, feel free to bring any comps, and I'll take a look at them, on the front end. With VA, there's something called Tidewater.
I was just going to say Tidewater. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, if it doesn't make value before they publish a report, they'll do the same thing that Dan mentions and give an opportunity. I mean, it's rare that we kind of miss the boat completely. Are there times where like there might be a pending sale that, went to close in the interim between our research and, the effective date of the appraisal, maybe, and now it's closed and now, it's a valid sale that we can use, maybe that's the case, but for the most part, we have to pay for and have access to all the data, services that realtors use. And, we're going to be pretty much spot on most of the time.
Right.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive. Most of you aren't just listening right now. You're driving, cleaning, and even exercising. But what if you could be saving money by switching to Progressive? Drivers who save by switching save nearly $750 on average. And auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Multitask right now. Quote today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $744 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations.
No, for sure. So what improvements would you say? We always get told by sellers when I go through and ask, what have you done to the house? What updates? When were you, when they were done? And oftentimes they'll be like, I got, my appliance package is brand new and my AC is new. My water heater, we put in 2 years ago. And I'm like, okay, have you done anything with your kitchen and bathroom? And they're like, I've updated the light fixtures and they're high-end light fixtures and, all that stuff, right? So you know where I'm going with this. Like, what actually gives value? What is usually what I'll tell sellers as well, and even myself, when you do updates, you're doing them for yourself. You're doing them to enjoy your life. You're doing them to enjoy your home. You shouldn't be focused on thinking of your house, your dwelling as just purely an investment, right? Otherwise, you're not going to do anything. Like you can literally, I had a seller, they put in $145,000 pool. They didn't get that $145,000 back whatsoever. They probably got about 35 when it all shook out compared to the other comps. And, and then they did a bunch of other stuff, right? So where do you caution, how do you caution sellers as to reconciling those pricing, people thinking that they're going to do this and that and how much it's going to turn for them? Typically, what do you see as giving the most value? And you see those things, you pull them online, Google, it says this gives you 40% back. It's all whatever. It's not exact, but they're coming up with numbers. But, I think like, for example, like impact windows, when you have impact windows, like there's an adjustment, right? So like, where are you making, I guess, better way to phrase this, like, where are you making those substantial like adjustments? Like, and what are the adjustments, relative to the cost of what was the work that needed to be done?
So like when I do like pre-listing stuff, they ask me what they should do to get the most money for their property or something like that. Most of the time it's basic stuff to make it show better. Right. And if it's a property that needs some work to get up to that stage where it's not marketed just to investors and it can be marketed to like an end user, those are the only properties that I like say, hey, you may need to repair this kitchen, you do some repairs in this kitchen or do X, Y, and Z. That's about it. Like if another property that's semi-updated asks what they should do, it may be nothing. You should not do anything. You're not in the real estate business. You're not in the renovation business. You're going to end up spending way too much money for a renovation and the market's not going to give you that money back.
Right.
Like it's hard to say.
No, but that's valuable. Like exactly what you're saying is 100%. Yeah.
But look at the bottom of the market for a neighborhood, the lowest price, and look at the highest price. And the only difference between them practically is condition. Like the bottom of the market stuff that's average and needs work. Top of the market's the fully remodeled stuff that's sold. So there's your margins in there. And it could be 30%, 40% between those two prices.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, sometimes sellers will talk to neighbors and get bad information, about like achieving the greatest, values. And, then they'll start doing things and they should have talked to a professional, either a seasoned realtor or an appraiser. And then they're like chasing their tails. And, I remember doing a property in West Pembroke Pines. It was an attached community that had townhomes and villas, and were fee simple. So they had little cordoned off or fenced little backyards or side yards. And the one I was appraising was a villa, and it had the most gorgeous pool. It was black and it was like salt water. I just wanted to dive into it. And when I did the appraisal, I couldn't find not one comp, going back like 3-4 years, going out 5 miles of a townhouse or villa that had a pool. And in my appraisal, the contributory value of that pool was zero. Put aside that like the community had pools, but it wasn't like it was like Fort Lauderdale, like East, where some of these townhomes have their own like, mini pools or anything like that. That was not the case where this was located. And it shocked everybody. Now, did it have like intrinsic value? Did it like, make a buyer happy? And they're like, oh, we're definitely going to use this. Yes. But it was, it was a super adequacy. It was something that is not normal. There was no market response, based on comparables. And so, that's an extreme case. I definitely am a big fan of impact windows. I think that they serve many purposes, sound dampening, especially if the property abuts like a high traffic road or commercial space, it has some benefits to sound dampening. Security, it's like very hard to smash those and break in. Even firefighters use special tools to get in. There's credits that you can get, the aesthetics of it. In my appraisals, I do line item adjustment just for hurricane impact windows. And I think that like when a homeowner does put impact windows, we tend to see that these are the type of people that like definitely take care of their homes and do extra stuff and do more stuff. Generally speaking. So I'm a big proponent of that, but, it just, I definitely wouldn't chase, the numbers. And like Dan said, do things because you hope to get stuff back. That's the wrong way to think about it.
No, 100%. And I do, over the years, I've done a lot of properties that need a lot of work. And when I speak to those sellers, oftentimes sellers will say, we can like do renovations. And I'm like, okay, no, please God, don't. So let me explain, at the end of the day, there's so many things wrong with that, right? Like the time you're going to have to put into it, the caliber of the work, the chasing Joe, the contractor, make sure he actually shows up. Are you going to permit it? Are you not going to permit it? Then what, right? The style of it, right? And, so typically you'll see houses that are renovated and the house will be 800,000 and it's beautifully done to the nines and everything's done, right? And then the house that's not renovated is like pushing 6. And they're like, what do you mean? Like I could get that, or even 550, right? Or it's an investor friendly house because it's all a disaster inside. And they're like, I don't understand. Like the roof is X, this is Y, this is Z. I could get that house done in $150,000. I'm like, yes, but you forget about the hassle tax. And that's like Nicole's like coined term is like the hassle tax. The fact that that human has to buy your house and manage everything and pay the carrying costs and have to deal with the stress and aggravation of not being in their house for who the heck knows how long, right? Because that can take time. So it's not just the straight up cost of doing that work. There's always this like chunky buffer. And I see it just from data because I've sold hundreds of houses in that capacity. And it's like, you see it, you can see, and the buyers will say, you know, I have to do this. Like I have to hold this house. I have to pay for 2 houses while I'm renovating it. And so there's like that hassle tax. So I always tell sellers, like, unless you have a stronghold, like let's say you've done the kitchen, you've done the bathroom, your floors are done. And then there's like one bathroom that's like, and needs some love, right? So, and if you're willing to spend a little bit of money to get that one bathroom, we could put a new vanity, a new toilet, tile, and, you could put a new shower door and you're good, right? And then it shows better. And then that's helpful. But if you don't have that and you're just completely like ground zero, don't do anything. Clean it. Clean it so it smells nice. And that's it. And it's going to sell for the price it needs to sell, because even if you were to put the money into it, you're not getting it back. It's not going to come back to you. So yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Well, was there anything I may have missed that you guys wanted to chime in about?
I do not. I think the big takeaway for agents is learn how to price properly. If you don't know how to price properly, contact an appraiser in your Rolodex and see and reach out to them, ask them how they do it. And always be present for the appraisal and provide that information for us, because at the end of the day, it's just information, and it's part of doing your job to make sure you've done everything you could.
And just kind of wrapping this up from the side of a seller, right? So I'm talking to everyone out there, agents, end users, consumers, potential sellers, how does this apply to you, right? So listening to everything that we're sharing, keep all that in mind through your lens as a seller, and realize, this is, you're selling your house, you're going to price it. You have to sell it to the buyer. You then also have to sell it to the bank. So regardless of if the buyer's whoop-de-doo about your house and they're willing to pay an exorbitant amount, which, by the way, this is not the market. That's no longer the case. 4 or 5 years ago, yes, they were able and willing to pay nonsensical numbers. But if the buyer is willing to pay that number and they're not paying cash, then there's an appraiser involved. And the bank is not just going to come up with numbers and make things up. They are going to have data, and data is not, you can't ignore that. So, keep that in mind. Don't shoot yourself in the foot, making sure that you're pricing it properly and being proactive when things are not moving. Oftentimes, if the property is showing great and it's pictured great and you have, and it's fully renovated and lovely and it's not selling, it is not because your agent's terrible. Is because you're priced wrong. You cannot market anything that's overpriced. You cannot market something that has an MSRP of 50 grand and say it's worth 80, unless some fancy person lived in it and you're selling it like, something like that from a like a relic or whatever they call it. But, at the end of the day, it really does boil down to price and the economics of that. And so anyway, guys, go ahead.
On the flip side, I just wanted to say one thing, because, in this market, we do have a lot of cash buyers, especially here in South Florida. I never understand the cash buyer that's spending, $500,000 at least for an asset, sometimes, upwards of $1 million, and they don't get an appraisal. Like I never can, wrap my head around that.
Me too.
I think just as it's important on the seller side, definitely to like set your expectations and understand what, the challenges are maybe with the property and price it correctly. The same applies on the flip side. If you're buying a house cash, use an appraiser. It doesn't matter who it is, as long as they're competent and they're, they understand that specific market and submarket, to determine what is the actual value of that property before your, inspection period runs out and you are going to lose your earnest money deposit, to understand, what is the fair market value, and then use that appraisal to negotiate. Hey, I know we agreed on this price, but it's not worth that. Can we talk about it? So it doesn't matter like, what angle you're looking at it from. It just makes sense. And obviously, Dan and I are biased, that's how we make a living, but it just makes sense, to go in as an informed consumer.
Yeah, and even you said, you brought to mind a cash buyer, right? So I did say, yes, unless you're a cash buyer, there's no appraiser, but that does not mean that the cash buyer is not going to be savvy and want to give you the fair market price too. It doesn't mean that the cash buyer is going to justify your house is worth $700,000 when it's barely worth $6. That cash buyer is probably a very savvy person and they know, right? So just because it is a cash buyer and you're not going to have an appraisal does not necessarily mean your price is going to be justified either way. So it's kind of, yeah. But.
And if you're an agent working with that cash buyer, at a minimum, you should be recommending they get an appraisal because you don't want them coming back 2 years from now if they're upside down on that or if they're a huge loss on the property. I relied on Nicole to price that properly. She said it was a great deal. But if you have that email saying, hey, I told you to get that appraisal, here's the email or whatever, that's going to save your butt. So if your buyer's not getting an appraisal on a cash deal, just make sure you have that email that you sent to them.
My buyer last year bought a property, a condo. We got it fully furnished with probably 40 grand worth of like really high end furniture for $240. That seller bought it a year before for $350. And at the time the seller bought it, let me tell you, there were no comps that justified that price either. But they went to the listing agent and, people are not scrupulous and they basically probably were like, it's a great deal, blah, blah. And they didn't provide comps to the buyer, at the very least, right? Forget about appraisal. At the very least, provide the buyer the comps to say, hey, and if I am on both sides of the deals, my buyer or seller will get all the comps. And it's just very neutral. Here it is. Make your decision, right? But that was painful that she took such a ridiculous loss. My buyer made out like a bandit, but it stinks because she was put in that position where it was cash and nobody gave her the information, much less got an appraisal. And then she had the need to sell it later. And there you go. Big problem.
Yep.
So
that's an E&O claim.
Yeah.
That's an E&O claim.
It was very interesting. So, but anyway, guys, you are wonderful as always. Much love to you both. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell everyone real quick, maybe a website that they can find you. And if you guys have any questions or want to kind of have them help with a private situation of, even if you have any personal matters, like Moody said, estates, divorces, things like that, they can help with all of those. So go ahead, let us know. Dan, what's a good website to hit you up?
Reach out to me, empireappraisalgroup.com. I do all sorts of private work, estates, date of death stuff, lots of divorce work. I go into court and testify, and lots of work with agents, helping them price their listings correctly. So empireappraisalgroup.com. Be happy to talk to anybody.
Same here. So I can be reached at sirappraisal.com. I've been appraising 23 years. I cover Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. I am not VA, but I do, regular appraisals and FHA. The private stuff, similar to Dan, I do pre-listing, pre-sale, date of death, which is a step-up appraisal.
Oh, yes.
And those are important to mitigate, your tax output. And then divorce appraisals. I do another one specialize in, which is a FEMA. It's a 50% rule appraisal if you do improvements to the property and are located in a flood zone. So those are the types of appraisals. But also, if a person needs to adjust their livable square footage and correct that on the public records or bedroom bathroom count, I can help with that. So I'm happy to help.
Amazing, guys. Thank you so much as always. Everyone out there, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you got some golden nuggets out of this. If you have any questions for me, please don't hesitate to reach out, or for the gentleman on our show today. And that is a wrap. Thank you for joining Real Estate Real and Unscripted with Nicole. And I hope to see you guys on the next show.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. What if comparing car insurance rates was as easy as putting on your favorite podcast? With Progressive, it is. Just visit the Progressive website to quote with all the coverages you want. You'll see Progressive's direct rate, then their tool will provide options from other companies so you can compare. All you need to do is choose the rate and coverage you like. Quote today at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.